2010 meeting of the Arbor Downtown Development Committee. Roll call. Gary Boren.
Here.
Newcomb Clark. Russ Collins.
Here.
Bob Gunzel. Lee Gunn.
Here.
Roger Hewitt.
Here.
John Hubchuk. Joan Lowenstein.
Here.
John Moa.
Here.
Keith Orr.
Here.
Andy Smith. John Slitt.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Our first order of business is audience participation, and I'd like to remind those participating that we enforce a strict 4-minute guideline. So our first speaker is Ali Ramlawi.
Hello. I'd like to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to come and speak today. Unfortunately, 4 minutes won't be enough time to cover everything I want to cover. I'll have to kind of go back and forth through some of the things that I've jotted down, things that come to mind as I witness what's happening to downtown. I am the owner of Jerusalem Gardens, and that has propelled me to be here today. This board, along with the city, has commenced a pretty enormous civil engineering project next to me. And unfortunately, I feel a little slighted, to be honest with you guys, about the process, the handling, and so on. I'll get to that later. But also, I'm not only a business owner, I am a resident of the 5th Ward. And I lived in this town for over 10 years, and I have a lot of friends and so on, business owners, who are increasingly unhappy with what's going on in the direction that the downtown is going. And I know you guys are here with the best intentions, but unfortunately, they're not proving to be, all of them, to be successful. If I can just point out a few things first. Again, one of the things that comes to mind are like the bike hoops. They're not very practical. The ones that say art, no one ever uses them. I see a tree being used, a pole, a signpost. Those bike hoops are not being used, and it goes into the context of what's occurring here is that things are not user-friendly. All these initiatives are being done without taking into consideration the user and the friendliness and the actual practicality of such things. Now I know for myself, I asked for bike hoops about 3 years ago, and they said they couldn't do it for me because of the redevelopment of 5th Ave. And so anyhow, things like the bike hoops, again, not practical. The parking meters, the new parking meters that have been installed, so much confusion. People are not happy with the new parking meters at all. Before, it was convenient. You left some quarters in your car. You go, you pop a couple quarters in, you go to the store, you come out, bam, you're out. The new parking meters are inconvenient. There's usually a line of people. One person who's never used it before is causing a backup. You got to wait. You got to remember what number you're parked at. You got to go through multiple steps. They're just not user-friendly. And this is, I'm on the street. I deal with hundreds of customers every day. And these are the things that I'm hearing from my customers. These are the things I'm hearing from the residents. These are the things I'm hearing from the people that are using the things that this board and the city government is imposing on downtown and in our community. And I just feel like you should know this. You should know that this is what people are feeling. This is what people are saying. You know what I mean? I know you guys have the best intention, but the end result is a lot of frustration and dissatisfaction with people like me who go to use these things. Third thing I want to point out, besides the bike hoops and parking meters that are not as practical as they need to be, are the bump outs. One bump out in particular that I have a big problem with is on the northwest corner of Liberty and Division, where the used furniture shop used to be. These bump outs are causing...
Sorry, that's the end of your time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, that was a quick 4 minutes.
Our next speaker is Diana Nearing.
Hi, I'm Diana Nearing, and I'm with the Shelter Association, and Ellen Schulmeister is the CEO at the shelter. And I just wanted to introduce us and let you know that we're here to answer any questions when the resolution comes up dealing with the shelter. So, and I want to thank the subcommittee for working with us on that. So thank you.
Thank you. We have reports from our city boards and commissions, and first up is, actually only up, is Ray Detter from the Downtown Citizens Advisory Council.
Sometimes up. I forgot my glasses today, so I'll do the best I can. I'm going to pass these around, and I'll discuss those at the end.
They weren't part of these.
They might work.
Okay.
I know,
Were they just reading glasses?
I'll manage it. No, they're not.
All right. Okay.
But the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council was very pleased, as you might imagine, that through the initiative of Council Member Saber Briere, the City Council passed unanimously a resolution to appoint 12 members to a downtown street outreach task force. And the task force has 6 months to address the larger issue of unmet outreach and service needs of the downtown and ways of enforcing the existing panhandling ordinance. They will be building on the knowledge and improvements developed as a result of 3 years' work of an earlier task force appointed in May of 2003 that recommended neighborhood patrols in the downtown business districts, encouraged increased outreach by social service agencies, and got City Council to approve an ordinance placing limits on solicitation for money, thanks to Joan Lowenstein, who came into it and essentially wrote for us largely, that ordinance, which made things a lot better. And the goal of this task force is not to start out with a solution, but to first of all identify the problem, perhaps its causes, and to suggest potential solutions that may involve the entire community, service sectors, and safety services. The task force has not even met yet, but already its appointment has already encouraged discussion in various levels. It encouraged discussion down the last Downtown Marketing Task Force, also last night. This is Advisory Council. We spent a lot of time discussing some of the possibilities. And as I said, first of all, we identify the problem and provide solutions. It suggested that it's perception. Well, perception usually has an element of reality. To what degree is that reality the case? And we don't start out with the idea that the only solution to our problem is to have more policemen walking the streets of downtown Ann Arbor. There may be other solutions given the nature of our current economic situation. But what, on the same time, as an example, the mayor has suggested that we might have targeted approaches to various problems. Where you have a problem, that you act in the case of that particular problem, not having something which is going on all the time. That seems like a good solution. Certainly it might work in the area of Liberty Plaza, which has had some increased problems recently. But such issues as what are the limits on panhandling, we heard that the state law may have changed. There's some communities in the state that now prohibit panhandling entirely. We're going to find out whether or not that's in fact true, and if it is true, how does it impact us? Does anyone have to go hungry in Ann Arbor? Well, a member of the Citizens Advisory Council is also somebody who works at the shelter. She said emphatically last night that the programs that are currently being provided in Ann Arbor by the shelter and other groups provide meals for people. If that is the case, then anybody who's soliciting on the street in terms of the nature of hunger should be given information with regard to what the possibilities are in terms of satisfying that need. Otherwise, I believe they're in violation of the law in terms of misrepresentation with regard to why they're there. Can we pass a law which simply keeps people from lying down on the sidewalk or sitting on the sidewalk, which then usually puts them within that 2 feet that our current ordinance limits? Those are the sorts of things that we want to deal with regard to the possibilities. We're not out to get anybody. We first of all want to see what the nature of the problem is, but certainly there's a growing concern that leads us to want to do something in this particular case, and we think that we can do it reasonably through programs and information and through developing very systematic approaches to not necessarily eliminating panhandling, but making the whole situation better for everyone. And now I just want to very briefly point out what I just passed out to you, and that is an invitation next Thursday, October 14th at 10:30. The mayor has consented to be a part of a program. It's only going to be a 15-minute program directly in front of the Union, where we're installing a glass frame which commemorates Kennedy's speech in October 14th of 1960. It's 50 years. It's the beginning of the whole program throughout the nation. And it's going to get a lot of national attention. And the national news media are going to be there because across the street right after our dedication, where the mayor is going to speak along with the deputy director of the Peace Corps and others, we're going to have a big event over there with the governor and others. But I invite you to that only because the DDA has been involved in the street exhibit program ever since its beginning. And you are a part of that program in terms of the nature of getting it started, and I'd like you very much to be there. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 4 on our agenda is the status of task force efforts. The library lot RFP.
That's
It's you.
Um,
Forget what it's you.
The committee has not met, again, since our last board meeting, and I have nothing to report.
The committee to discuss a mutually beneficial agreement with the city.
I guess that's me. We've met twice, and I took back, Russ and I took back to the committee the recommendation from the retreat on how to handle enforcement, parking enforcement, and we directed Susan and the DDA's attorney to start drafting up amendments to the current parking agreement based on what we reviewed at the retreat that we will bring back to the next meeting, which is Monday morning at 8:30, and discuss with the entire committee. But we seem to be making progress on the parking end of it, and I think there seems to be a general agreement on the development end, but we haven't got the specifics of drafting that yet.
Okay. Anyone have any questions for Roger on that? Thank you, Roger. Next is approval of our minutes, the approval of the September 1st meeting minutes. Could I have a motion for approval of those, please?
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And also we have our retreat minutes from September 22nd.
Support.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Our subcommittee reports of partnerships. We only have one partner here.
That's right, only one co-chair.
So now you don't have to fight over it?
Yeah, for once, Sandy and I don't have to fight over who's going to give the report. So I miss my colleague Sandy and look forward to her at the meeting, which is going to be a week from today at 9 a.m. So we'll report that at the beginning. The next committee meeting is Wednesday, October 13th at 9 a.m. At the last meeting, we talked about the energy saving grant program, which we talk about at every meeting. So far, 94 buildings and businesses have been approved for the Phase 1 grants. 64 energy audits have been completed and 27 audits are underway. 21 businesses and buildings have installed improvements using DDA Phase 2 funding. And the average payback for the businesses that have installed the improvement is 3.1 years. So we're very happy with all of the numerical dynamics of this program in terms of the number of folks that have participated and the effect that it's having. We're going to do another program in 2010 and 2011. However, the application deadline is going to be in November because there's a backlog of energy auditors available to do the energy audits. We also had a brief discussion about the skate park funding and possibly reallocating it. But after discussing it briefly, it seems that there's that what we need to do is unclear, so we just didn't get very deep into that discussion. We did have a very productive discussion about the DDA playing a significant role in the process of downtown city property redevelopment. And the idea here is for the DDA to take charge of working with the community on conceptual planning, and Susan put a very, very wonderful document together about how we might facilitate that process. And the committee consensus, and there's a lot more DDA discussion and committee work that needs to happen on this, but our preliminary consensus was that the process can be improved in terms of working with the community, working with developers, and it fits perfectly into the DDA's mission to strengthen the downtown area and attract new private investment. So with that dynamic and with the skills and knowledge that are available on the DDA staff, I think this idea of encouraging the property redevelopment is a very wonderful strategic direction that we can look at. Something that isn't quite as strategic, cigarette butts and shaggy tree pits. Susan had a brainstorm that we could make some progress with getting cigarette butts off the streets by providing grants to businesses. But then she looked into it a little bit and consulted the colleagues at the IDA even before the conference and said, you know, nobody's reporting great success with this, so we probably should back away from that. And I really appreciate, one, that she had the idea, two, that the due diligence went into it, and so that's not a project that we are going to pursue. However, it does appeir that business investment districts or business investment zones are very effective at dealing with that kind of those kinds of problems, making sure that the plantings and things are taken care of by the local businesses and that there's funding available for that. So encouraging the Main Street Biz, the growth of that, or having other business investment districts established, maybe another kind of strategic direction that all came from the very small notice of cigarette butts on the street. We also took a very careful look and got some reports and were able to ask questions to the Shelter Association of Washtenaw County. Their grant request, which is included in your packet, is up for our vote today. The Shelter Association assists over 1,500 individuals. This is very impactful on the downtown because homeless individuals, folks with mental illness and other issues, spend time in our downtown, a lot of time in our downtown, and an ability to address those issues is very important, and the Shelter Association does a very, very good job of it. In the grant proposal, or in the resolution that's in front of you, you'll notice that there's statistics about the kinds of things, but washers and dryers and showers and medical assistance for these individuals, job training and housing assistance is part of what they provide, and the committee is very, very strongly in support of this resolution and hopes that you feel the same way. We also got a report from our Planning Commission representative, and the Planning Commission is actively pursuing the Washtenaw Avenue corridor study, which doesn't really affect the downtown, but we're very supportive of all of our colleagues throughout Ann Arbor that are dealing with making our town vital. And there's other studies on other corridors, particularly Main Street, to standardize the processes for those commission rules. So, are there any questions about the? Yes.
Are you going to move the shelter resolution?
I would be happy to do that, which is on page 7
I will support
in
it.
your packet. So I would like to move that we vote on the resolution providing a grant to the Shelter Association of Washtenaw County.
I think Lee's seconded.
Yes, I do.
Is there discussion, Mayor?
I just appreciate this coming forward, and would note that this is very much in keeping with past practice of the DDA and past grants and funding. I think it was just last winter that the DDA participated with the city and actually with the county in an effort to expand the capacity at the shelter for people who may have needed it with a tough winter approaching. So this seems just in keeping very much with what the DDA has done in the past, and I'm very much in support.
Good. And I would point out also that it was within our policy of providing infrastructure improvements, and so that is what's being provided here: washers and dryers, lockers and chairs, an emergency generator, etc. And this is coming out of our housing fund, is it not?
Correct. Yeah, 100% of the funding is coming out of the housing fund.
Wow.
Could I ask a question of the shelter folks?
Of course.
I assume the county's okay with this? Yes, the county's okay. The county about, almost done. We've reviewed the county.
Ellen, step up to the microphone.
Yeah,
In this media age, we don't exist unless there's a microphone.
Yes, Mr. Gonzel, the county has been consulted in regards to all of the updates having to do with the energy audit and also the emergency generator and everything else, so.
Good,
we've
thanks
talked
for
to them.
checking with facilities.
You can take the boy out of the county, but you Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes, thank you. Next is our Transportation Committee. John?
Thanks. You'll see on, what pages? 11 and 12 in your packet, there's some information that Amber has done a great job of sort of leading up an effort of looking at our the issue of bicycle parking counts. And so it speaks actually to the issue you brought up. As part of what we're looking at is trying to start quantifying the number of racks, where they are, how well they're being used, where they're not being used, what's effective and what isn't effective. And it's really the first attempt to try to quantify it. And so the intern that was working with Amber this summer went around and did counts on a regular basis in different areas. And you'll see in your board packet on page 11, there are a couple of tables there that give a feel for where the most used racks are, and it's no surprise that around campus area that it tends to be the most. And you'll see, for instance, on Forest up to 22.8 bikes, and ranging down to Church at 7.5. One thing to keep in mind, it was done over the summer, and there's a little chart at the very bottom of the page, so it's from May through September. So obviously, seasonally, it's going to go up and down quite a bit. It also is important to note that there really are multiple elements. One are the traditional racks. A second are the art racks. A third are the mobile racks, the great parking spaces, and then the lockers. So part of this effort is really trying to understand how they're being used, what's being used well, what's not being used well. And of course, the other category are the ones that are being chained to trees and lampposts and all that. So there's even information on that. And it's interesting because they found that I think something like 80% are actually parked in appropriate places. So it's not really that people are kind of willy-nilly parking bikes where they really shouldn't be, or maybe are obstructing things or in the way. So, but it's good information. It starts to tell us a few places that racks should go in, but also places where potentially we remove them, free up sidewalk space for other uses. So anyway, this is a good first step. The intent is to try to keep doing this, keep monitoring it. One other thing that was significant was they actually did some informal survey work, tried to talk to, I think there were 75, 80 folks that they spoke to, trying to get input on what works and what doesn't work. And it's obviously informal, but it tries to start getting some feel for it. And what was one of the things that was interesting is that the average was the idea that people were coming downtown to go shopping. So the average person spent about $22. They were there for some period of time. And also there were also kind of a cadre of regular riders. It's daily or multiple times during the week. So again, have I hit most of the highlights, you guys, Amber? So it's a first attempt at it to give us some information to actually make changes and adjust things. So I would imagine that as other people in the community have input, thoughts, contacting and talking to Amber would be a good first step. Because part of it is, keep in mind, it's not very scientific. It's tough. You put in bike racks, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't work. It's hard to sort of study these sorts of things. So it's a bit of trial and error. Any questions about the bike program moving forward?
Can I just forward a comment? Sure. I appreciate that Ali came in and gave us some input, his point of view, and relayed the anecdotes that he's encountered from his customers and walking the street. But I do think that the public needs to know that the kind of study that was done with bike parking And also, there's a tremendous amount of survey that goes on about parking and parking meters, and we've had survey reports to us about the new parking meters. So the DDA takes very seriously the issues that were raised by the speaker. And we do try to deal with them in statistical and objective ways to get information, feedback, so that we can make decisions that are based on logic and community need rather than a whim of a city board. So although we may not always make the right decision, we really do use data and research as we confront these kinds of issues, and we hope that the decisions are more correct than incorrect. But any report, any data that we get, statistical or anecdotal, is beneficial, and so thank you for bringing that information forward.
Any other questions about the bicycle program?
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate this effort, and I hope that if we continue it, perhaps at the same times as years go by, and we should be, because one of the problems we've had is getting this accurate count of how many more people are riding and cycling around town now that we have more bike lanes and now that the system is expanding. I think it's going to be nice to see what the effect of an opened up 5th and Division are going to have, in the future. That should make a big difference for people who want to cycle downtown. So I really appreciate the effort to collect this data.
Well, Amber's done a terrific job. It sort of follows on the heels of doing the bike map and other pieces being put in place. The next thing, Washtenaw Area Transportation Study, WATS, is interested in having a DDA member be on their policy committee. So, please let Susan know if anyone is interested. It sort of goes hand in hand with the idea of collecting data, is trying to connect with other agencies and other groups who are doing things that, share information. So if anyone has an interest in that, please contact Susan. The next item, at the meeting we talked quite a bit about AATA, and really two main elements. One is the circulator, or the former link. Keith and Roger had put some work into putting together what would be an ideal circulator, with the idea of, and correct me if I'm off a little here, but I think every 5 minutes, 12 months a year, 16 hours a day, something that would be very robust. Well, as you can imagine, the dollars that came back from AATA were equally robust, what they were looking for a dollar's commitment to that. So Keith is good enough to volunteer to sort of take it on to take another look at it and coordinate, how we might want to start reacting to those preliminary numbers as we try to work something out that may or may not work, quite honestly. I think there's a lot of mixed feelings about what can work and what can't work. But the best thing is to just try to keep modeling something, put cost to it, and then see how everyone feels about it. Anything else anyone want to add about the link piece? Keith, Roger, Susan. The other thing we talked about was the Ypsi Ann Arbor transit issue. That is a very complex issue because as much as anything, our trying to understand what we are trying to accomplish is such a challenge. Do we want more frequent service? Do we want night service? Do we want weekend service? Do we want this? Do we want that? Who's it serving? And again, it's one of those areas where there just isn't much data out there. It's a challenging thing to collect data for. We do have some preliminary information that's interesting, such as how many people in the city of Ypsi work in Ann Arbor, how many people in Ypsi Township work in Ann Arbor. And I found those numbers interesting because the township, for instance, has a significant number of people, more people in the township than in the city. So you can imagine, how do you create a hub on the other end becomes a challenge. So there's some complexity to all that, including who the partners might be. Eastern, Washtenaw Community College, University of Michigan, how may they fit into this picture? AATA, from their perspective, U of M is their biggest customer. So it's, how do we fit into that scenario in looking at these various routes? So I think at this point, it's a little bit of an ongoing process we've got to look at. One of the things that's been talked about is looking at existing routes and what can be done to make an existing route sort of more robust and frequent, and amp it up and see how that works. Again, it may be a bit of a trial and error issue due to lack of data. So I think that's sort of in a nutshell. Susan, do you have anything else that you think is worth sharing with folks about the FC Ann Arbor?
Just the only thing that I would add is that what was compelling about the data that is available is there is a clear demand along the number 4 Washtenaw route. And it's actually very interesting because it's overlapping, as was mentioned earlier, the commission is looking at Washtenaw corridor. And there's a Washtenaw Avenue corridor study where there are a lot of municipalities sort of at work together, collaboratively working. The demand on that one route was twice any of the other routes. So what's exciting about it is it's somewhat strategic. Whatever role we might play, it's not just adding service to what's already there, but there's a growing logic to it with all the municipalities at play, kind of thinking through how to improve that corridor, maybe more infill development, structurally sort of thinking about how each municipality plays a part in the future vision for what Washtenaw corridor looks like, and transit is one piece in that. So it's exciting that we're kind of narrowing in, at least for the low-hanging fruit, that it's a place where there's already a lot of work underway. So, yeah.
And the other point is that the number 4 is the only one of those Ypsi to Ann Arbor routes that goes to the medical center.
Yeah.
He serves the importance of the university's involvement in that as well.
And it's exciting for us. I've spoken a little bit with Maggie Ladd in Southview. It also touches the Southview district, and their perception is transit is something they want to promote, but they don't feel that they have as much service as they'd like. So I have an opportunity with Maggie's help to also figure out strategies to encourage some of the workers in that area to consider using transit that may not today.
The other thing that's interesting about it is Ypsi Ann Arbor service in light of AATA's work on a county master plan. And I'd encourage folks, there are several meetings going on where they're soliciting input. I think one's actually tonight or tomorrow night, the next couple of
Tonight,
tonight
at 6 at the library.
at the library. So if anyone is interested, to hear how they're soliciting input in their process for that whole county-wide plan, that opportunity is available. Any questions about the Ypsi Ann Arbor?
I just would add a little more if I could. I was one of the speakers along with Mayor Shriver of Ypsilanti yesterday at the Ypsi Chamber monthly meeting. And there was considerable discussion because Ypsilanti, of course, has a ballot initiative up to fund their AATA participation. And one of the things they really would like to focus on is speeding up transit for the individuals who use that Ypsilanti Ann Arbor link. And in meetings that I've had with both Michael Ford and Jesse Bernstein, who's now the chair of AATA, they're very interested in that as well. So as you know, there's a lot of synergy coming in from different groups to figure some things out. I mean, buses are caught in the traffic on Washtenaw, but is there a way to speed things up? And some more expresses that don't make perhaps as many stops. There's a lot of people using that corridor, and it's a vital corridor. So many people coming in, particularly the medical center. At the same time, I would just report back on a meeting that I attended, I guess it's 2 weeks ago, and the chamber chair, board chair, and the chamber director were there in Dearborn talking about the East-West Rail, and I think that project is much further along than people, because obviously so many of us don't get the updates, but MDOT has purchased and will have finished the refurbishing of the cars, and they're going to be bringing a train to the SEMCOG meeting at the end of this month. They're double-decker stainless steel. They've completely new spring shocks, as I understand it, carpets, windows, seats, everything decked out. And they're tentatively looking at running trains for the Detroit Thanksgiving Day Parade, and also for the big hockey game coming up in Ann Arbor in December that'll be at the Big House. And then beyond that, exploring a whole lot of other ones. And with the federal funding that's in place, Dearborn got $30 million for a new station out of the funds that came for high-speed rail, which those improvements helped the commuter rail as well. Though $244 million was devoted to Michigan, quite a bit of that will go for track improvements. Some of the track improvements are actually going on. There's a couple of pieces of money that MDOT is still looking for to make this happen, but it's pretty exciting. And folks in Ypsilanti that I've talked to are very excited about the prospect of the economic development that would go on with having a transit hub in Ypsilanti, downtown Ypsilanti, that would connect right to the medical center. 10 minutes later, you get off the train right where you work. And there's thousands of people that sign a zip code to work in the medical center area. And so I thought it was, there's some exciting things going on, and I think it contributes to, obviously, what you're doing here. And I would expect that when that is up and running at some point, there would be a bus that would take people directly to downtown Ann Arbor. So there is a connection there. And the circulator study that is underway that the city and the AAT and the university are participating in, that is that route would go right through the Fuller Transit Center as well. So people would get off the train, get on the circulator, arrive Central Campus, perhaps downtown, North Campus area. So I think there's a great deal of effort and visioning going on right now about better linkage between the communities of Ann Arbor.
Yeah, actually, speaking of various forms of alternative transportation, we've already talked about bikes, we've talked about buses, we've talked about trains. One last thing is 2 more zip cars have been added to the fleet. So that's up to 8. The 2 new ones will be located up at the McKinley Town Center lot. And no cost to the DDA. The car made the decision there, the demand warrants it, and so that's yet another way to get around. We're not just all about parking anymore. And that's all I have. Our next meeting is Wednesday, October 27th at 9 a.m.
I would also mention that a few of us this past weekend were at the International Downtown Association meeting in Fort Worth, and a couple of us spent a lot of time talking with an exhibitor there who had bike rental. That's sort of similar to a zip car idea, but for bikes. And we are going to try to arrange for some kind of presentation of that system maybe in the next couple of months. The next one is capital improvements. I turn back to another John.
First of all, the South Fifth Avenue underground garage. Earth retention drilling along the full perimeter of the site has been completed. That means the big auger cast crane that's been there since the beginning is now off the site and hopefully not to return. Forming and steel installation continues on the east leg of the garage. The floor of that section has been completed. Actually the first, the next floor is almost ready to be poured. It is scheduled to be poured October 16th, so the east leg of the garage is moving along rapidly. Mass excavation is 85% complete. With approximately 210,000 cubic yards excavated, and so we are getting close to the end of mass excavation. Dewatering is being somewhat of an issue. They are having some challenges with getting water moved off the site, but those problems are being worked on with the city, and hopefully that will go smoothly. Fifth Division status, we've added 16 new parking spaces on North and South Division, or excuse me, North and South 5th, which have just opened up. And work along South 5th will be complete within a couple of weeks. They still have some brickwork and some furniture installations to do. And I think that they will be done with that work completely for the season November 15th. The city is planning on resurfacing 5th Ave, the next block north of here, between Ann and Huron, tomorrow, not next week. So the fire station will be, the work in front of the fire station will also be completed, and so the fire trucks will be back in their home next week. And that's all I have. Questions? Our next meeting is next Wednesday, October 13th at 11 a.m.
Thank you. Excellent report. Roger, we have the Operations Committee next.
Page 13. We have our monthly parking figures. Overall revenues throughout the system were down in August compared with the previous August by 1.8%. The vast majority of that is from the Fifth Avenue, the former library lot, which was opened in August of 2009, but now, of course, is under construction. So we've lost that entire structure. Other changes to the system did not quite make up for that. Another significant drop was in meter bags. Some of the construction, particularly around the university construction, has ended, North Quad particularly. So the meter bag rentals are down a little bit. As we've seen many times in the past, that when things change, for instance, with the North Quad construction being done, and a lot of construction vehicles that were parked in Maynard are not there anymore, so the Maynard revenue numbers were down slightly, but the system is very fluid and flexible, and particularly in the campus area, vacancies that occur tend to be rather short-term. So I don't think there's anything to be concerned about, a very modest dip. The rates were the same both in both August. We raised rates, I believe, in July of August 2009, and then we've raised rates again in September last month. So the two Augusts have the same rate structure. Joe and I will be glad to answer any questions you might have on that. But again, the big dips were essentially due to construction, either new construction or construction ending.
How about at Ann and Ashley? Do you know that it's as though there was a deep...
Yeah.
Or is that actually, wait a second. Yeah, about $6,000 increase.
Yeah. It's difficult to see, particularly relatively small amounts.
There wasn't a single thing you can point to
No.
on that one.
On Maynard, we certainly could, and on the meter bags, and on obviously the Fifth Avenue lot. The others, but I think you'll notice that these do tend to fluctuate month to month, and it's a much better barometer is the quarterly, or particularly the annual changes. Okay. Any other questions at all? The next couple pages were actually, I think, requested from some board members. Wanted to know what the increase is in hourly patrons. If we're starting on this graph, basically starting as a base year of 2004, each year shows you the number of additional hourly parking patrons over that base year of 2004. So as you can see in 2010, our hourly patrons, and this is patrons in the parking structures and on the surface lots where we can measure them. We can't really measure the meters as far as actual patrons go. We've seen an increase since 2004 of almost 500,000 hourly patrons in actual numbers of entries and exits. So the system, as you can see, has a fairly steady growth to its use over a period of time.
It's pretty aggressive growth.
Yeah, it's
100,000 people a year. Partners.
Now, the length of stay varies too, but clearly there is a long-term demand in the system. And the next page on 15 is just a graph of what our gross annual revenue from the parking system has been over the last 5 years. So you see we've gone from a little under 12 million to approaching, not quite, but approaching 15 million. Again, it's a rather steady growth in revenue. So from those two indications, the parking system is both growing and very viable.
And of course, the income is both monthly and...
Yes, that includes income throughout the system, which is meters on the street, monthly parking in the structures, the surface lots, meter bags, the whole gamut.
I have a question. With the replacement of parking meters with the machines, will that provide the opportunity to do some tracking of how much all those spaces are used and where they're used and not used?
Absolutely. Before, in the old style parking meters, all we could do was know how much money we took in.
Yeah.
Now we can track length of stay, hours they're used, a whole realm of things that the new meters allow us as far as data, as well, of course, as the convenience of being able to use credit cards and debit cards in them. Joe, do you know what percentage in the pay stations are credit or debit cards? Mark? Do you know?
Yeah, it's about half.
About half?
Yeah, a little bit higher than that.
Okay. So, yeah, another obviously very embraced method of payment with the pay stations.
Could I just, okay, so just so I'm clear on that, so about half of the payments coming in are, at the pay stations, are credit or debit cards?
Just a clarification, is that on-street or?
The on-street.
On-street might be higher than that. I need to double check that.
So maybe even be higher than 50% of the payments are, people are making use of a card? Oh, that's excellent.
I'm curious, to what extent do you think this increase over the 5 years in parking revenue is a result of rate increases or patronage, number of patrons? Do you know?
No, I don't know right off the top of my head. We have had, of course, we had one rate increase, I believe, in the meters. Actually was sort of balanced off by a reduction in the structures. I'm going to say about 4 years ago. And then we had a rate increase in the beginning of 2009 and also in September of 2010, which are all approved as part of the financing for the new parking structure. So certainly some of this is a result of rate increases, but if I had to guess, I'd say it's probably 50-50. We could certainly figure out that.
If I could just add one thing also worth noting, at the same time we've seen a dramatic growth in the number of Go Passes distributed and the use of the Go Pass. So this is a parking usage increase that's not in any way deterring people from using other transit modes. So I just want that, it's intermingled. There's an increasing demand to be downtown.
Right, and I might also add, we've been close to what is considered capacity in our parking system for some time. And so the potential, I think, for growth with increased patronage it's not a huge area of growth at this point.
When the Nelson-Nygaard study was done on our parking system, I think the overall usage in the parking structures was about, peak usage was about 84% during the peak hours. And I think the last time we've checked, it's close to or over 90% now in most of the structures. 85% is the industry standard for a, quote, full system. And once you get beyond 85% capacity, you start having a perception that you do not have parking available, which was one of the major drivers to build the new underground structure, is that we are approaching capacity in all our structures. I know Maynard during the peak times during the school year is now over 95 to close to 100% occupied. Okay. Any other questions? Parking. We spent a fair amount of time reviewing the 10-year plan during our committee meeting. Joe has spent an enormous amount of time and effort in completely revising and updating our 10-year plan. It's a very complex spreadsheet that has a lot of interlinked parts. It's a planning document that we use so that we can project 10 years out of where we think we will be based on what we're doing now and what we know now. He's had it reviewed by independent authority to make sure that the numbers are correct and that the system, the spreadsheet formulas and so forth are valid. And we are going to be reviewing this every 3 months. We used to review it every year, but back when we had large fund balances, the planning was not nearly as critical as it is now. Then our fund balances are down because of all the new construction that we're doing. So we are going to take a look at that every 3 months. We're going to update it as we do the budget every 3 months whenever there is a change in a board authorized expenditure or change in revenue. For instance, the Shelter Association grant will now revise our budget and revise our 10-year plan based on that grant. So we looked at that in detail. Certainly we know what, and we're going to have some graphs, I think, after we review it next board meeting. We'll bring back our next committee meeting. We'll bring back some graphs that will show you what our fund balances look like and how they compare with our revenue. We are trying to keep our fund balances within a minimum of 15% of our gross revenue, which is what the accountants recommend. There will be, I think, a couple of years, I think this year and next year, where we'll be about at 15%, and then we start going back up. It's probably going to be about 2017 till we really start getting some robust fund balances again. Again, because of the new construction that we're doing. But we think we're still in very solid financial position, but we're going to be keeping a very close, tight eye on it. And I, again, want to thank Joe for all the time he's put in on that. It's, again, a very complex document. And again, we'll bring some actual figures and graphs to the next board meeting. The only other next item is a review. We are trying a small pilot program on the roof of the 4th and William parking structure. We're offering an all-day parking on the roof for $5 if you're in before 9 and out after 3. Again, a pilot to try to see if there is interest in cheaper parking in less convenient parts of parking structures. So far, there has not been it's just started in September, and the initial numbers are not large, but it's very preliminary, and we'll keep reporting back on how that pilot program is going. But this is one of the many ideas of parking demand management, where we're trying to price based on the demand for particular parking spaces. Actually, the next item I've already done in the graphs. I jumped ahead there. I believe that's everything in my report. Are there any questions?
One small question.
Sure.
The early bird special, how does that get advertised, or how do we let folks know it's out there and available?
I know we've been putting information in the parking structures themselves. Joe, can you light us on yours?
Themselves in other structures.
Right, there are a number of websites that associations are carrying it. Get Downtown's carrying it on their website, and then the DDA has it on theirs as well. We're also doing handouts at some of the other structures to pull that interest and bring them in.
And the thousands and thousands of people are watching this.
Today only, early bird special.
Our whole parking demand management is a whole range of different ideas and initiatives, and we've tried a number of pilot projects, both to test demand and also to test the technology that we're using. Some have been successful and some haven't. We've tried valet parking at Maynard for an extended period of time with really very little interest in it. So we ended that pilot project. We've done some other technology pilot projects that have tested our new technology and our accounts payable systems and so forth. And those have been very successful. So we're sort of poised now to start implementing a number of additional pilot projects on how we can essentially manage the system based on the demand.
Okay, anything further, Roger?
Just that our next committee meeting will be Wednesday, October 27th at 11 a.m.
Thank you. Number 7 on our agenda is other business matters. So I wanted to follow up on something that we had touched on in the retreat, which was a possible kind of reorganization of some of our committees based on some different objectives that we might be looking at. And you will see at pages 16 and 17, we have just some suggestions that we have come up with. John Split and I met with Susan and talked about this, and so we had some ideas here that we thought that we would put out to the board, and it's just here as a discussion item, not for any resolution or any immediate kinds of change. But you'll see that what we had suggested, we thought to kind of back from the end result to forward, was that we really thought that we needed a new committee, which is on the back page, which is on page 17, which would look at economic development and communication. And we really had this reinforced when we went to the IDA meeting this past weekend, because this is just so much of what other downtown associations are doing, is working on economic development issues, and many of them have, of course they're bigger cities, they have large staffs of people doing marketing and communication plans and all kinds of fancy things. So we thought we just needed to get started by looking at having a committee that would do things like background economic research for redevelopment, some of the work that Susan has been doing with the consulting group that's looking at the RFP for the South Fifth Avenue lot has really opened our eyes to seeing what kind of expertise we can get by working with consultants and figuring out some market forces, and just basically working with the partners that we already have, of the city, of course, and the university and Spark, to think about how to be very proactive on going out and getting development rather than just kind of sitting and waiting for something to come to us. So that's one idea, was to create this new committee. So we thought, you know, it's kind of like buying things at the art fair. What my husband always says is, if I buy something that we already have has to go out first. So we thought, well, we have so many committees that maybe one of the committees has to go out, and we don't want to get rid of any of our committees because we love them so much. But we thought that at least for now, one of our suggestions was to merge operations and capital improvements, because the capital improvements right now, we are so obsessed and occupied with our big Fifth Avenue project that kind of is, you know, just kind of goes along, and there aren't many other things that committee has to do other than monitor that. So that this would be a good time to kind of merge the operations and capital improvements, at least temporarily. And then continue to have our transportation committee, possibly with someone to co-chair, because John has been carrying that burden all by himself. And then to continue to have partnerships, which would have just a little bit different focus, given what the focus would be of the Economic Development Committee. So this is just put out for your perusal and enjoyment. And I don't know if any of you have any suggestions or comments yet. Russ?
It sounds very reasonable, and you know, I just, as a reminder to myself and the rest of the DDA board, that you know, the staff has recommended, and I agree wholeheartedly, that we essentially limit the number of committees so that we match the human resources to the amount of work that there is to be done. So I think it makes a tremendous amount of sense to essentially keep to the 4 major ongoing committee format. So how do we move this forward? I mean, we had a retreat, we had a discussion, and so I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but obviously if we're going to do something, we've got to implement it in some kind of...
Right. Well, our intent was to get some input today at this meeting, and then we will work behind the scenes really to come up with a more concrete, we love concrete, a more right, a more concrete plan, and then bring it up at our next board meeting, a formal resolution that would shift or establish the new committee and shift the other committee structures. John?
I personally, I'm thrilled with this. I mean, I think it could head us in a direction that's important to go in. So I think it's terrific, but I think part of it is the linkage of what it potentially means to our staffing, our staff structure and what their job descriptions and roles are, and also reaching out to the people who would be sort of our partners in this, and whether the city, the county, Spark, all those folks. And I know there's starting to be those conversations. Susan's been talking to lots of folks, and and how we clarify, what once we do it, what are we doing? It becomes a really interesting question. But I think it's it's an important part of our future to move in that direction. But I think we need to do it sort of step by step. If it's just creating a committee doesn't do it. We got to have the staff support that makes sense, and we got to make sure that the people we're partnering with, that we're effective.
Lee?
Yeah, I think this Economic Development and Communication Committee also, we might be open to having some other people from the community on this committee the same way we do with partnerships, because this really is an idea and development committee, and we could use expertise from other areas.
That is so true, and that actually, I think it was maybe both Susan and I were in a session at the IDA where some of the people who do this well made that suggestion, said you've got to get other people, other expertise from the community. So that was definitely an idea that we brought back from there as well. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Keith?
That's exactly what I was going to say. So, nothing more to say. And I was in that same committee, same session with you, so absolutely, that was one of the things they talked about. It's one thing to have people out here who like, advertising and marketing, and that's helpful to understanding communications, but important to have some communications expertise on that committee as well. And certainly, much like partnerships where we have people from planning, having people from the city is incredibly important in the development piece, or it doesn't go anywhere.
Right. Any other comments or suggestions? Yeah, Roger.
John and I have to get together then.
You two would have to share.
Well, I have ideas about how we're going to share.
Can we name the committee?
Yeah.
I kind of like bricks and money.
Ooh, good.
I think that's an interesting thing, though, to ask folks about the co-chair notion. Obviously, you folks have pioneered it. Unfortunately, of course, you and Sandy don't get along, so you're not a very good model for it. That's true. Personally, I think it's a good idea. It gets everyone invested and involved actively in the committees. It's just sort of and creates flexibility. I like the idea of it, but I'd be curious if other folks feel that it works.
That's a good point. I really do appreciate working with Sandy, and it seems to work well for us. But one of the problems with co-chairs is sometimes then nobody takes charge of the committee. And I mean, again, that's just kind of a human dynamic thing that happens. So it is kind of an interesting...
Especially if there's sort of a duality in what we're talking about here.
Right,
sort
the
of
merging of the committees
merging
makes
of two
sense.
committees, it works well, but it's... Your point's well taken.
So, and I also don't think that it's something that you implement and then you keep it that way forever. It may work now because we have a co-chair situation that works. It does make sense to merge those committees and create a co-chair situation. And I've been, knowing John and Roger, I think that they would work very well together. But it's also something that we should probably reassess in a year or 2 years, because it can create a situation where without a point person, then the staff ends up dealing with two people and both of them are deferring to the other person, and so nothing gets done. So.
Yeah, but interestingly, the partnerships co-chair situation was created by a merger.
That's
Rock
true.
was folded in with partnerships,
yes,
and that's why. So, again.
And also, there is a lot of overlap on operations and capital improvements, so I think that helps it.
Right, that's what we found.
As there was between Rock and partnerships.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, this has all been helpful. We will get together and come out with something that's a more detailed framework and bring it up before the group at our November meeting. Is there something else? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. When we were talking about how are we going to make people aware of the parking that's going to be the special offer, I wanted to go back to something that we talked about. Are there any continuing efforts to make sure that everybody who works in the downtown in the evening is aware of the special program where you can park for $1 if you get there after 4? Have we done more to advertise that? Because remember, one of the problems we're trying to get around was restaurant and service workers taking up all the part of the street spaces for the whole evening, so that patrons don't have a place to park, and yet they can park for $1 in a structure.
There was a lot of ideas around that whole idea. Unfortunately, just because of all sorts of projects going on, we've kind of left things where they were with whatever small amount of marketing we were doing after we submitted the demand management report to the city in April. And I think there had been this thought that we would have an engaged conversation and that would be a good kickoff, and things being what they are. So this is a good reminder that we need to re-engage on all cylinders.
It may be as simple as one facet of it could be printing up posters to put in the work areas of all the restaurants and downtown businesses so their employees are more aware of the program.
Yep.
Can I suggest we set up a communications committee?
And the other point is something I brought up at the retreat, and I just wanted to make sure at some point maybe a committee takes it up, which is just to start to take a look at what it would take to move those curbs on State Street to allow them a much wider thoroughfare there, because that's pretty cramped. And it would also facilitate, as I said then, sidewalk cafes on State in between Liberty and William.
Thank you. We will take it into consideration. We have time for other audience participation. If there is anyone who would like to address us, again, for a 4-minute time. Ray?
Just a quick comment. I often go to the Broadway Bridge, and I noted that the lights were out. And I had tried repeatedly over a number of weeks, and finally, all the lights are working except for one fixture now. But during that time period, I found out that an audit or inventory is only taken once a year. So if you have street lights out in your areas or downtown business areas, report it in yourself, because it is going to be fixed in another week or two. But it's one thing to see them night after night out, and this is how you can go about getting it fixed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? There is no one else. Do we need to move adjournment, or are we just adjourned? We are adjourned.
Adjourned.